Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me once again is Mr. Kevin Durso. Kevin, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? Happy New Year as well and all that type of stuff.
Yeah, doing all right. We're kicking 2023 off pretty strong, in my opinion. The Flyers are on a 4-game win streak. That's got to be good, right?
Sure. I mean, depends on who you ask, I guess. But
All right, well, we're gonna get into that in just 1 second here. Before we do, follow our Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Sports Talk Philly. All right, getting right into it. 4-game win streak. They beat 3 pretty bad teams. Let's be honest. San Jose, bottom of the league. Anaheim, bottom of the league. Arizona, bottom of the league. This is also something I said right before we went live here. This is also the topic that is most likely to be irrelevant by the time the show actually airs, because we are recording on Sunday morning in our usual Sunday morning time slot before the game against the Toronto Maple Leafs, a game I do not expect the Philadelphia Flyers to win.
totally fair. But then again, I don't know if anybody pegged them to beat the LA Kings either.
No,
The LA Kings are a top 10 team in the league too.
That is fair.
So,
Out of the 4 wins, that is definitely the strongest win in terms of a strength of schedule perspective.
right.
And LA is a decent team. It's looking like they're going to end up making the playoffs in the West. And I think they're a lot of fun. Philip Deneau is a fun player. They're second in their division. They're in a good spot right now. And the Flyers played a good game.
I mean, the other thing to kind of keep in mind is, they've played, they beat LA. LA, like 2 nights later, beat Dallas, who was right up in that ranking. That doesn't mean the Flyers would, but just it goes to show you, like, any given night kind of stuff. The Flyers also recently enough have beaten the New Jersey Devils, who are 5th in the league. They've kind of let games get a little lopsided, but then held their own and made them interesting against Toronto a few weeks back, right before the break. And against Carolina, they did this. They took Vegas to overtime. Like, these are, and that's everybody. That's practically the entire top 7 that I'm talking about.
Right.
And they've all, they've held their own with every single one of those teams.
Sure.
So that's the one thing I think you can safely say is, regardless of who they're playing, they're a no quit type of team. And
they're a John Tortorella hockey team for
right.
sure.
But if you wanted, I mean, last year we were sitting here, and this is what I was on OMB Puckcast this week, leading up to our show, because we took the handful of weeks off over the break and all that type of stuff, and I believe that they did it, like, roughly did the same thing, maybe close to. So this was their comeback, like, and also, hey, not only are we back, but we're rapidly approaching the halfway point of the season. Let's talk about it, kind of stuff. And at the very least, the one thing that everybody has been able to talk about is, at this time last year, we were already, not only were we already down on the season to begin with, like, oh, this season's going nowhere. It was going nowhere, and it felt like it had no purpose because it was just lifeless. They barely showed up. This is not a team that doesn't show up. I am not at all going to tell you they're going to make the playoffs all of a sudden or something like that.
Right.
But I'm also not going to tell you that they're going to be the worst team in the league, because it's pretty obvious they're not.
Right. It's a decent mix of young, hungry, up-and-coming prospecty type guys who are looking to, prove that they belong as National League hockey players, and older, experienced guys who are looking to prove that they still belong, looking to maybe boost some trade value before the deadline, looking to get a next contract, stuff like that.
Sure, and maybe people don't want to hear this because it is, kind of plays into their favor, if you will, but they have gotten guys back, and it has made a bit of a difference. Like, as they've gotten a more formidable lineup, as a Wade Allison comes back and looks the part of a top 9 player for real,
really solid.
Looks the part of a top 9 player, or just as you're able to move your lines around, the more that Joel Farabee plays, the more he's going to look like he belongs where he's been playing all year.
Yep.
Getting, not even getting back, like, sometimes something happens and it allows for a Cam York to come up, and Cam York looks like, if he goes anywhere else for the rest of the year, then what are we doing here? Because he clearly looks the part, right? stuff like that. And you got to give credit where it's due on the bulk of this stretch of time. You know, it could have been a very different story if things would have gone a little differently. We go and do our last show before the break. You know, we knew we had kind of 3 weeks leading up to this. Okay, so they play Columbus and they win the game against Columbus. Fine. Yeah. Kind of expected.
Sure.
They battle against Toronto. They battle against Carolina, but the Carolina game features an interesting moment because Carter Hart gets hurt.
Yes.
Not even starting the game. He gets hurt, coming in relief, ends up leaving the game, and the goalie who was playing that night was Sam Ersson.
Yep.
His debut goes horribly. You know, to that point, he's got to get
about as bad as it gets.
And it's not his fault, obviously. Like, he's got to get pulled from the game. They've given up 5 goals. It's not on him per se, but you understand how these things are going to look when
having to put that kid back in the game,
right?
Like
and you understand how it's going to look whenever he would get his next start, if it was to come this year anyway, or even if it doesn't, for that matter, because if it does, then when you're previewing the game, these are the numbers that are going to show up. And if it doesn't, then he's got an entire year-long stat line. That's one game.
Season.
That's one game. A goals against at that point isn't going to be 5. It's going to be something like 7.5 because he didn't play more than 2 periods. And his save percentage was going to be something like,
for his own sake,
70%.
You got to get him back on the ice and let him play a real game.
Well, not even that.
It just looks terrible.
So he comes back in. And, you know, to his credit, plays well enough at that point that the team starts to come back, and he doesn't even become the goalie of record. So he doesn't take the loss in a debut where he allowed 5 goals and got pulled, because he comes back came back into the game and finished, and he's still not the goalie of record.
And if they had done any more scoring, he would have been in line for the W.
Potentially.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And then, you know, he gets the entire, you know, and we're going to talk about Hart a little bit more later in the show, because obviously it's probably the one thing over the entire last 3 weeks that we can be the most critical about when it comes to the Flyers, because the handling of that was confusing, to say the least. But
wait, are you saying that there's a confusing story surrounding a medical issue with a Philadelphia Flyer?
Absolutely,
they would never do that. We've never had confusing or conflicting reports about injuries in the Philadelphia Flyers organization.
But I do think this one's glossed over a lot more. Like, as much as it was something we were trying to make a big, like,
a lot of it hid over the Christmas break.
No, that's not even the reason. It's if he's not able to play because of whatever happens, and then you start to talk about when he could come back, and because it's everything around his injury. It's how he ended up getting hurt. Then after the how, it's, well, truthfully, and I felt this way from the beginning. What was the worst that could happen? Okay, no. In terms of, he got hurt. It's the last game before a break, so you can't do anything about it for 3 days.
Right.
Take the 3 days, come back. What's the worst that could happen if you come back? It's not the worst injury, so maybe he doesn't play on the road trip that they have, but it's 3 games scattered out over almost a week and a half.
Right.
That's not horrendous. This is not Sean Couturier hurt himself before training camp, and oh, by the way, you won't see him until March.
Here's the thing. Right. Here's the thing, though, with this team, I'm so scarred.
Oh, you can still disagree, by the way. Like,
right.
You disagree with the handle.
And I even disagree with the fact that it's not that big a deal. Like, I hear the phrase concussion and what's the worst that can happen, and I'd like to introduce you to a man named Eric Lindros.
Okay, that's not what I mean by that, though.
Well, I just mean in terms of how the team handles it.
Well, but that's beside the point. Like, my point was if the worst thing that you can come back with is it's been 3 days since the holiday break, the first day back, he's not able to practice right now, which means he's not going on the trip, which means we're going to wait it out, and that gives us another week. In a week, we'll come back. We'll see how it goes, you know? But at least during the course of that week, if they would have had to come right out and say, like, because that's what it turned out to be. Let's be clear about that. If they would have turned around on the Tuesday they come back to practice and say, he's not practicing right now, or maybe he even is, but we can't take him on the trip because we don't want to mishandle this situation. It is concussion protocol.
Well, then
He's not going on a trip. Then you take him out of play
Right.
for 3 games, but at least it was only 3 games, and the span of time between that and the next home game was over a week.
Well,
It's
and
way less urgent than we got
Right.
5 games in the next 10 days, and we are going to try to squeeze this guy in there.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I believe, if I recall correctly, I believe he was cleared kind of right away Tuesday morning when as the team was coming home to Philadelphia. So I believe he was clear for kind of 2 full days before that game.
Oh, he was cleared long before then. Actually,
Oh, was it before that? Okay.
He was cleared before the end of the road trip.
Okay.
And they just didn't activate him and didn't do anything because, again, to Ersson's credit, you go on the road, you're being told kind of in a way,
this is your road trip,
right? Well, I don't know about that completely. Like if San Jose goes pretty rough,
San Jose shells them. Yeah, that's fair.
Right. Well, then I don't know. They were giving him another chance because we didn't play well enough in front of him in Carolina. Let's see what happens this time. And that's the thing about and I described this road trip. All 3 games were a little different. First game, they're not actually it's not that they're not playing poorly, but they're in a position to lose a game.
Right.
3-1 early third period. And they get themselves back into the game. And they tie it up with just over 2 minutes left. And then they finally win a game in overtime. And it actually almost actually got lost in the game that, oh, by the way, as soon as the overtime goal is scored, you had it took a second before it kind of registered. Like, wait, that's Ersson's first win. Like, forget the fact that it was 3-1 30 minutes ago.
Right. We got this kid the W.
Right. He just got to win. Okay. And then they find a way to win in LA. And you're like, okay. And it's Ersson again. And you're like, okay. So they give him the start against Anaheim. And he damn near pulls a shutout. He was 40 seconds away from a shutout and 3 straight wins to start his career.
Yep.
And it's created an interesting dynamic to the goaltending now. Because now you're coming home, you go, what do you do? Carter Hart's ready. And let's be clear. Carter Hart was cleared prior to that game in Anaheim. Could have played then. And Tortorella said, no, I'm not doing basically just now didn't give an explanation, obviously, because let's be real, it's John Tortorella and he's not going to give you he doesn't have to. Sometimes he doesn't want to. But
often he doesn't want to.
But if in fairness, the only thing that was weird was he wasn't activated. That was about the only thing that was weird. I actually kind of understood I'm making a choice. Carter could have gone if we wanted him to, but I'm putting Ersson back in.
Ride the hot hand.
He'll start. Carter will sit on the bench. They just didn't even activate him because they put Hart on IR before trip began. And I guess in that sense it made it easy because when they did activate Hart formally, then now you're going to sit there and probably ask yourself, especially if we've gone to this point in talking about this. So what's the deal with Felix Sandstrom?
Yeah. He's in the mystery pit with Ryan Ellis and
no, he's not. He really actually isn't.
Cam Atkinson.
Because the first part of the problem was, and I believe that this was it was actually right around the time it was post Columbus game. So they played their last home game of 2022 with everything the way it was, and they get ready to go on a trip, and they tell you Sandstrom's sick. There's a bug that's going around, so he's sick. He's not going on the road trip, so no Toronto, no Carolina, and Ersson's called up. And my honest first belief was, okay, he's called up, but Carter's going to get these 2 games because that Toronto game's at a weird 2:00 time. They'll treat it like a 1:00 on a Saturday and a 7:00 the next night and say you can still play both, and we won't see him. So I was actually kind of surprised they gave him the Carolina game to begin with.
That's fair.
And then when he comes back, he's able to back up when they come back, the team does. He's able to back up because Carter's now hurt.
Right.
Okay, fine. So he backs up in San Jose, and the reasoning is fine. I want to see Ersson one more time. I want to see if we can play better in front of him because he really came back in. And look, the thing that was probably most impressive was exactly the part that you're talking about. You throw him back into his debut. It's already not going well.
And goalies are notoriously fragile head cases.
Right. So he gets thrown back into the game and plays flawlessly the rest of the way from the time he comes back. And then, okay, so now you're saying, let's do better this time. Let's give him a better performance and see if he can maybe position himself to win a game.
Right.
And then he wins that game. And he is definitely a big reason for it because
he played well.
he played really well. And then
Really well.
So what do you do kind of naturally off of that? You say, sure, he's getting the next one too. As long as, since Carter wasn't ready to come back at that
Why
point,
not?
he gets the next one too. And this time it was probably the exact situation where you would have hoped that Hart was back because it's not the San Jose Sharks. It's the LA Kings.
Yep.
And you saw what happened when they played Carolina. And it was a guy who had never played in an NHL game before.
Right.
And he goes out there and has another one of those games. Especially when you're playing in a third period of a tie game. Whoever scores the next one obviously is getting an edge. And lo and behold, he makes 11 saves. You score a shorthanded goal. And you win again.
Here we are. Yep.
So he gets the start in Anaheim. And again, same thing. Like they outplayed Anaheim way more. And the only thing that was probably disappointing was, he really stood in there in the second period against Anaheim. And then in the third period, as the game is put away, as it's very obvious they're going to win, he's closing in on a shutout, and he gets to the final minute and gives up. Probably it was the last shot he faced, I think. And it happens. They were buzzing. You could kind of see it.
Got to be disappointing for him.
But as the team comes home, you're sitting there going, okay, so Ersson's played well enough to stay.
Absolutely.
As much as you could understand why he'd be sent down because this is not really his place, let's not also kid ourselves about
the kid just doubled your win total on the over the last 2 months.
Well, I was going to go even a little bit of you're right, but I was going to go a different direction with it. It's here. He's made 4 starts and he's got 3 wins.
Yeah.
And Felix Sandstrom has played in 10 games and he's got 1 win.
Right.
And that's not against Felix Sandstrom.
And Felix Sandstrom has looked really good on occasion.
Right. But you can't deny what the record is. But it puts you in a tough spot because Felix Sandstrom has played well enough, even for the record, and even for some of the numbers being, the lower end of things. The goals against is above 3. The save percentage is lower than 900. That kind of doesn't. It still would be a situation where you don't want to just sit there and go, well, let's try to pass them through waivers because if any team's got a goalie injury, they're going after it.
Well, that's what I was just about to ask: can Felix Sandstrom would have to pass through waivers?
And Ersson does not.
Ersson does not. Okay. I think that's the difference maker. Unless there's a trade, which I don't necessarily think there will be, especially during the season. I think it's got to be Ersson going down. And again, I don't necessarily think that should be the case, and obviously we have to wait until Sandstrom shows back up. But I think it's the waiver thing that makes the difference.
It could. The thing that the Flyers have done to kind of just kick it down the road a little bit is Sandstrom, and to his credit, he had to accept this, took a conditioning stint with the Phantoms.
Okay.
Because in fairness to him, when was the last time that Felix Sandstrom played a game?
That is fair.
So
we talked about that on the show, that Carter Hart was getting a lot of the workload.
I believe the last time that Sandstrom played may have been like the Colorado game or something, like on the road.
Yeah,
that may have been it because if I remember correctly, I believe Carter definitely had the New Jersey game. I believe he had the Ranger game that they lost, and then I'm positive he had the Columbus game, and then he was gonna take over and do because then Sandstrom was sick
right
by that point. So when Sandstrom's sick and
Carter Hart's going to play everything.
Well, not only that, but no, because he didn't. Because then they gave Ersson a start in that time, and then so happened that by that point,
Carter Hart got hurt coming in relief, and yeah.
Well, and that's it. Kind of in a way, this is Ersson running with an opportunity because if Hart doesn't get hurt and it's a 1-game start and it goes the way that it does, they probably send him back down.
Yep.
Because then Carter's able to play. Sandstrom's back from being sick, and they say we got to go on the road trip. Carter will probably get all 3 games, and that would have been the end of that, right?
The fact that he got a little bit of an extended look probably gave him the shot.
Sure, and the thing is that and this is where this comes into play. Ersson's getting at least 2 starts during the 2 weeks,
right?
Because as you mentioned, we're recording on the morning of the Toronto game, which
Right.
I'm certain will be Carter's at this point.
Yeah.
And you'll give
Ersson probably starts in Buffalo tomorrow.
right,
Though,
and
right?
you'll give Ersson the Buffalo game, and then I can picture the same thing the following week. Carter will probably play in Boston against the top team in the league.
Oof.
Actually, it lines. I know it sounds rough, but
I know.
at the same time, you're also giving Ersson probably at that point first of all a start at home, which he has not had yet, and a start against a team that he nearly shut out 3 weeks earlier.
Why is that game at
2 weeks?
1:00. That Boston game is at 1:00.
It's Martin Luther King Day.
Oh, that's fair.
So everybody, most people are not. That's why they did
right.
it.
Turns out retail doesn't get that day off. But yeah,
no, I'm with you on some of the weird times because it was what would they call it? Next Gen Day, I think is what it was called
for Toronto.
And they've got a 4:00 game on a Monday in February. Now, it would actually even make more sense if it was in Philadelphia because you could sit there and say, okay, it's President's Day. Maybe 4:00. It's late afternoon. It's not really
it's
a day
in
that
Calgary.
Right, it's not really a day everybody gets up, but it's in Calgary, and that's not a Canadian holiday. So, kind of what exactly
weird.
is going on there?
Yeah. Hey, Calgarians! It's a 1:00 game. Are you going to show up in the middle of this day that you have work?
I could look it up and find out that there is something.
It might be one of their extended bank holiday weekends.
It could be. I have no clue, but that's luckily that's the last really weird one.
But anyway, we're talking about the goalie starts coming up.
But I see Ersson getting that Anaheim game because why wouldn't you? You're going to play him against a team he's already faced.
That's fair. I didn't know
and played well against.
I didn't know if there was any merit to kind of throwing him to the Wolves in Boston and just trying to get 2 points out of Anaheim because you're not going to beat Boston anyway.
I don't know, and I'm curious to see. Like I said, I have no doubt in my mind that Hart probably gets the Toronto game and Ersson gets the Buffalo game or something like that.
Yeah,
but you kind of face do you split them against Washington?
By the way, mark it here first. If Carter Hart starts that Boston game, the Flyers win. We'll be back next week to talk about it, and we might have a better idea of who's starting on that Monday. If Carter Hart starts that game, he makes 417 saves, and they win it.
I don't know.
Yep.
Here's the thing: what you said wouldn't surprise me. I'm not expecting it because I don't know how much around the NHL we're going to talk as the show goes on today.
That's fair.
But that is, I was looking at something with them meaning Boston, the other day.
Boston's ridiculous.
And we are looking at something that is rare.
They're 31-4-4.
We're looking at something that's incredibly rare.
It's friggin' January. They have 4 regulation losses. It's January. Insane.
That wasn't even where I was going to go with it. I hear you with the 4 regulation losses thing. I look at a different number. They've got 39 games played. They are 2 shy of the halfway mark of the season. They have lost 8 total games.
Yes. The second place team in the league is the Carolina Hurricanes. They've lost 8 games in regulation.
Correct.
And then 7 more in overtime. They have 7 more losses than the Boston Bruins.
And by the way, the Bruins' next 2 games to get to halfway are Anaheim and Seattle. They are winning at least one.
Well, probably, yeah.
Seattle's been feisty. Seattle's
a good team. Yeah.
Seattle went into Toronto and beat up Toronto 5-1.
And who did Seattle beat last night? Seattle put up 8 against somebody.
I think Ottawa, which isn't as big of a deal, but
listen, you're still putting up 8 goals. That's not.
They're a very surprising team this year.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting because they're not
Dave Hackstall, baby.
They're not top 10 actively. They've hovered. I think
they have been for stretches.
It's games played. It's weird.
We're in that weird stage of the schedule where everyone's numbers are different.
Because who did Boston play last night? They played they were on the West Coast, San Jose, I guess, because they played LA earlier in the week too, and they won, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but that's the thing. So Boston beats a team like LA. LA's now played 43 games this year.
Wow.
Boston's only played 39. Like,
Yep.
the lopsided nature of which a team at this stage of the season has played, some are at halfway, some are not.
Well, and
Like,
as we talked about before the show, the Flyers have 12 games over the next 3 weeks. So like,
well, they're sitting at 39 right now too.
Yep.
Well,
And they're about to play a lot of hockey.
Well, it wasn't, in fairness to them, it wasn't supposed to be 12. It was supposed to be 11. That Buffalo game on Monday night was not originally there. They had to move something for the snowstorm that was up there, and they moved the game around for that, so they had to change some stuff. It was just, it's a bit of a mess. I mean, look,
the NHL has gotten really good at rejiggling the schedule the last couple of years.
Like, let's bring it back to the 4-game winning streak for a second with this.
Yeah.
No, because let's just be clear. They're still 9 points out of a playoff spot, and still, I mean, it's farther to the bottom, but like
Chuck Fletcher's year is just only 9 points.
They're also 9 points away from being tied with Anaheim,
who is abysmal.
Right, but I'm not trying. Like, my point being, they're not exactly going to just jump and make the playoffs here. So as far as I'm concerned, I don't mind moving a game that was supposed to, I think, be in March up to January and saying, let's just get it out of the way.
Yep.
Although I probably wouldn't be saying the same if I was talking about this from a Buffalo perspective, because that is a team that actually is clawing their way around and like very actively in the playoff race.
Buffalo's not done.
Buffalo has games to play and has a margin that is like manageable. Like, for not being a playoff team, they are very much in the discussion.
Hear me out here.
Okay.
Carter Hart to Buffalo.
No, but okay, because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen in season.
Okay, maybe in the off season.
Well, and here's why I say that, because
quite frankly, they probably have the cap space and the assets to make it happen in season if they really wanted to.
Well, because here's the questions that you start asking yourself. Once we get past, like, and this ties back to what we were just talking about. Once you get past that Boston Anaheim doublehead, like, or back to back, what happens next? Because the conditioning time is going to run out.
Right.
Now, what do you do with Sandstrom? Do you try to pass him through waivers then, or do you bring him back up? It seems like, and I would totally get this. I've heard that they like what Ersson's done. They want to keep him up there. And to be honest, if most teams had the situation of Carter Hart's approaching being a 24, 25-year-old veteran, he's right in that. He's because we can't deny how long he's played in the league.
He's making big boy money. He's played almost all of it at the NHL
He's an
level.
Established number one goaltender because of between service time and games played, and certainly, at least this season, performance.
Yep.
Based on his own individual numbers, by the way, not necessarily the win-loss record.
Of course.
But if you turn around and said, listen, with a team that's lost as much as the Flyers have, they've got a starting goaltender who's played a lot, who has a 286 goals against and a 911 save percentage. Most teams would sit there and say, I can probably make that a little better, and get that, like, if you can get that goals against down to like 270, maybe into the 260s, and the save percentage jumps up by another 5 to 10 points, you've got an elite goaltender.
And by the way, those are numbers in a year where save percentages are down, goal scoring is up, goals against is up.
Right.
Like, scoring numbers are up. So the fact that he has these numbers, which are already fine,
right,
on a bad team, in a year where scoring is up, Carter Hart has been impressive,
and it's also what makes what Ersson's done impressive, because
Absolutely.
that first game was 5 goals allowed in 47 minutes, which means it's not a 5 goals against. It's more. It was like It's at least 6 something, maybe pushing 7. His save percentage, truthfully, because there's no changing that, it's just based on shots faced, was .833. Since then, with the 3 starts he's made and 1, the goals against dropped to 290 and the save percentage is up to 905. That's respectable.
Especially with that bad first game.
That's very respectable.
Yep. Spectacular. Great turnaround out of him.
Right. So, but now you're in a position where you want to see more of Ersson. You definitely don't want to give, you're not doing anything with Carter Hart now, but you do face a decision if you get to the offseason, who do you want to have more? Potentially.
Okay, but you say you're not moving Carter Hart now, but why not? If Buffalo calls and asks, why not?
Because I don't think any team is asking in the middle of a season, especially for where Carter is in his contract.
I think if you look at where Buffalo is, they're in a bit of a hot streak now. They've been bad. Okay, do you remember a couple years ago when Duchesne and Panarin were on their and Bobrovsky were all on their last years in Columbus, and Jarmo Kekalainen basically came out and said, "We owe it to our fans to go for this. Like, we might not re-sign these guys, but like we owe it to our fans to go for it."
Right.
I wonder if something similar happens in Buffalo. If they say, it's been a bad decade, we haven't made the playoffs in forever, people are mad, we finally have a fun team, we have Rasmus Dahlin, we have Owen Power, we have Tage Thompson who's turning into a superstar, let's support them, and oh, by the way, it's a young, team-controlled goalie who's already proven himself at the NHL level. You know what I mean? It just feels like a pretty low-risk proposition if you're going for it as the Buffalo Sabres.
I hear you. There's now, granted, I think one thing I do think also, by the way, is that Buffalo does have a goaltender that I think they can build around, because I think Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is...
That is fair.
Is in the same position. Like, they're almost playing with this the way that the Flyers had to when Hart kind of came up, where it's like, well, listen, if he keeps being good, maybe we just have the player, and we don't have to do anything. But
that's fair.
And for Carter, it's going to be a tough kind of thing. Like, he's clearly established enough that he doesn't need to, he doesn't need to go to a team where he's part of a clear-cut tandem. Like,
he can be a number one.
Right. Exactly. That's all I'm trying to get at. So,
and for the record, I don't think they're going to trade him, quite frankly. I think they're going to do what they can to keep him through whatever the rebuild ends up looking like.
Well, I think for now, but
right. But that could always change.
Well, you're still entering an area of you're still entering a very critical situation because he's an RFA still, but he may be able to start to assert some control of his own situation,
Yes. Well, because you start talking about buying UFA years now.
Well, I'm not. I'm talking about that as next year, a contract year, plays itself out. He may start to be able to control his situation and say, I want out. Trade me at the deadline.
Right.
All
right, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Because maybe that's the case. Maybe next, maybe that goaltending question isn't one that gets answered this season. Maybe it's one that you go into next season with, and it's, and it's Hart and Ersson are the two guys who from day one are up. Well, and I said this earlier this week. This isn't the last you've seen of, it wouldn't have been the last you've seen of Ersson either way, and I don't think it's last, and I don't think it's the last you've seen of Sandstrom either. Nope. if he goes down, because I feel like at some point in time somebody's going to be hurt, and listen, who knows? Maybe the goalie who does get hurt is Ersson, who's had injury trouble before.
Right.
Maybe he's the guy who gets hurt, and all of a sudden you sit there and you say, well, no, that makes Carter Hart the more attractive guy because it's more infrequent. He's had like the last 2 years, he had injuries that ended the season, but I also think that you were being calculated with that approach. It didn't have to end the season, but you know what? We're done, so we're making him done.
I don't know. I'm sure Carter Hart was hurt at the time, but I think if the team was in playoff situations, it would have been a different story in terms of how his return was handled. I agree with you there. But yeah, it's crazy. If I told you 10 years ago that the Flyers had 3 good young goalies and couldn't figure out who to juggle, couldn't figure out who to send down, you would not have believed me.
Right.
We're talking the era where they just traded Bobrovsky away. They're scrambling to find, Brizgalov's falling off a cliff. They end up with Steve Mason. Like, come on, man.
Sure. and while we're on the goaltender subject, by the way, again, we're recording Sunday morning ahead of that Leafs game. Carter Hart is confirmed to start against Toronto.
Okay.
So there you go.
Starter Hart. There it is.
So there you go. You in the least surprising news of the day, because
absolutely.
But it obviously they've kept Ersson right now to play on occasion. So I'd be stunned if he doesn't play against Buffalo.
Yeah,
I'd be stunned.
Man, and Buffalo, I know we chit-chatted about them a little bit here, but they are coming.
They're having a good, I mean...
Did you see the Rasmus Dahlin toe drag from the other night?
No, I didn't, because it was, I'm guessing that was the Saturday game.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I was out for most of Saturday, so I didn't really get to watch much.
Oh, it was nasty. He just toe dragged across the entire slot.
He scored 2 goals, right? We were talking about the game tonight. He scored 2 against Minnesota, so it was one of the 2, right? It has to be.
Yeah, I believe it was the first one.
Right, because they came back and they won that game in overtime. They were 3 minutes away from losing, something like that. And Dahlin scored his second, tied the game, and they won in overtime. It's impressive stuff.
Like I said, they're coming. I'm looking at the Atlantic Division standings. They're 7 points behind Tampa with a game in hand.
Well, was there no more of a better indication of the Buffalo Sabres are kind of mean business any more than the night that so clearly everybody, they're playing in Washington, all eyes are on Ovechkin's got 2 and a game's going to overtime, and oh, by the way, Tage Thompson has 2 more as well, and guess who finished the hat trick? It wasn't the guy with 809 goals or whatever his number is.
And by the way, Buffalo 4 points out of a wild card spot with 4 games in hand.
It's very doable. And
the Buffalo Sabres are in the playoff race officially.
I think that there are, and we can talk more about this over the whole thing. I mean, maybe we'll push this down the line for a second because we're getting off of our Flyers topics, so we can probably finish those up in another 10 minutes because we've covered everything that happened on the win streak. We kind of already taken the look ahead with.
We even talked about the games before Christmas.
A little, yeah, we did. And listen, I want to bring up the Hart thing again because this was because it's the confusion of it. This is where the messaging thing comes in because this is the only thing I disagree with about the whole thing. The fact that he didn't play in 3 games doesn't bother me any. It's fine. You're
correct.
You want to do this right, and I even appreciate the fact that he was cleared and then still didn't play a game. Correct. And you waited to activate him. He got 2 extra days. Yep. By the way, here's another interesting part about this, that whole thing leading up to. They played in Anaheim. They didn't activate him. They activated him the day after when they got back from the trip, which, okay, it makes sense. It was a non-practice day. And then they didn't practice the next day either. They took 2 days off, came back, took a morning skate on the day of the game against Arizona, won the game with Carter in goal, took the next day off, and practiced Saturday and had Sunday usual, morning skate again.
Right.
But it was the way that it was, obviously when he comes out of the game against Carolina, you're going to just go into the break.
He's done for the night. Yeah.
Well, but there's nothing you're going to say. There's nothing you can do. They weren't going to come back on Christmas Eve when the league is completely off and say, well, we have an update for you now.
Hey, Merry Christmas. Carter Hart's out for 2 weeks. Right.
Right. No, they're going to just let it go. Right. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday comes and goes. Nobody plays a game because there's no games on, period, league-wide. And everybody starts to come back on Tuesday. And he's practicing. They tell us you get enough information that he's in protocol. He's practicing, and there ended up being I'm trying to remember exactly what happened in order because where it got confusing because I think it was, I don't know if IR was ever mentioned.
Okay.
But I think that was the time frame of there, Anthony Sanfilippo had a report out about he's not going on the trip.
Right.
Which means he'll miss 3 games.
Right.
Okay, fine. But then he's practicing. And then Tortorella says he's, I was playing Ersson on Thursday anyway, but he'll go on a trip and he's expected to start the last or something like that. I'm trying to remember, this is where it gets confusing because he was out there on Tuesday to practice and looked okay, but obviously was not
still in protocol.
Still, was not available.
Right.
And within the span of 24 hours, Tortorella, you know what it was on Tuesday? He practices and Tortorella said he's good to go. That's what it was.
Right.
And there's a report out from Sanfilippo that says he's not going to play on the road trip.
He's not good to go.
Well, or no, that he's not good. Not only is he not good to go, he's not going to play on the road trip, and he's not going to even travel.
Okay.
Then the next day comes, or that was out there. I think that was out there before the practice, so that everybody sees him practice. It's like, okay, and Tortorella says he's good to go. All right, whatever. The next morning, he's on IR before practice starts, and everybody goes, "Oh, okay." So I guess he's not playing against San Jose the next night.
Right.
Okay. So what's the deal with that? And that's where, so again, I think that might be where the report came from at that point. Like, the good to go thing was good to go. He ends up on IR, and everybody's going, so what happened to good to go? And then that's where the report came from, where it's like, okay, he's not good to go. He's not going to play on the road trip. He's not even going to go on the road trip. And within the hour, John Tortorella comes back out and says, no, he's going on the road trip. I was going to play Ersson anyway on Thursday, so that's not a big deal. And he's expected to play. I expect him to be back for the last two of the road trip, and he would start the last two of the road trip. I had people retweeting me or quote tweeting me when he didn't start against LA because again, this has nothing to do with. I understand what the injury is, and I understand that concussions are unpredictable and you've got to treat them carefully. That's not what I'm about with this. My point is you had every reason to just you want to make it easy on yourselves from a PR and messaging standpoint. Just come out the day he ended up on IR and say he's not going on the trip.
Right.
You just bought yourself a week.
Right.
For a week, you don't have to talk about this. You'll see because it's really easy.
Two sentences. He's not going on the trip. We'll reevaluate when we get back to Philadelphia.
Boom. Done. Exactly. All you had to come out and say is he was placed on IR this morning. We hoped he'd be good to go. He's not. As a precaution, we're keeping him home. We're not even taking him on the trip, so he'll miss the 3 games. And when we get back, we'll figure it out. We'll have an update when we get back. And then he could have played against Arizona, and it would have been right on the money.
Yep.
Instead, and this was what my point was. It has nothing to do with he wasn't ready to play or hadn't cleared protocol by Saturday against LA. That was not the point of what I was trying to say. What I was trying to get at is why did you let your head coach, who's the only person who comes forward and addresses the media with any information about this type of stuff? Why did you even let him say he may be ready?
Right.
Why do you even put an expectation on it? You want to save yourself some expectation? Your expectation could have been he's not going to play for 3 games and we'll have an update when we get back. Then the expectation isn't that he's even going to play against Arizona. It's we'll have an update before that game.
Right.
That's easy to meet. That's an easy expectation to meet. You go play your 3 games on the road. Nobody talks about Carter Hart. And you
can focus on the 3 games in front of you.
And you could very well come back and say, listen, we hoped to have a more positive update, but he's not going to be ready for Arizona either.
Right.
So we're going to continue to monitor day to day. We only have 1 game on the road for the next week. We'll see where it goes. So he could play at any point in time over that stretch, but for now he's staying on IR. Again, done deal, end of story. But they had to complicate it by putting an estimate on, well, he's expected to play the last 2 games of the road trip. So why just say it if it wasn't going to happen?
Right.
Tortorella got lucky in the sense that he was able to hide behind the performance of Ersson, in a sense of, well, I wanted to give him another look anyway to see if he was going to be, to see him play better. We didn't play well enough in front of him the first time, and he really showed me something in the 3rd period having to come back into the game. That's all fair stuff, but you kind of hid behind after saying Hart was good to go the day before. Well, it didn't matter anyway. I wasn't starting him against San Jose anyway.
Right.
Well, okay, but we didn't know that 24 hours earlier. And how convenient for you that he's still expected to play those last 2 games.
Well, and the good news is, as we sit here again recording on Sunday morning, he played against Arizona Thursday, no real issues, cleared to start against Toronto on Sunday night. All good news. The
only issue he had on Thursday was there was definitely a little rust factor coming from missing 2 weeks. But
right, you're looking at 2 weeks off. He might have had an extra turkey burger or something at some point. I know the kid's disciplined, but
he warmed up by the time the 3rd period rolled around. The first couple periods, he didn't get a lot of action in the 1st period. That didn't help. I believe it was really early 2nd period he gave up the 2nd goal.
Oh, he better be sharp right off the bat tonight, because Toronto's no joke.
Well, I think that there's no better way to get him warmed back up than play Arizona. So
for sure.
Now I think he should be in a good spot and ready to go. We'll see how it goes, but that was I just want to also like make it clear that I like my whole point with him not playing on the road trip had nothing to do with like, oh gee, they said he would play. No, my point is don't put expectations on an injury that doesn't have a timeline.
Right. Fair enough.
Like, and why you even let the coach say anything along the lines of, well, here's an expectation. Why you would even allow that?
You think people let John Tortorella say stuff?
No, my point is that you can. Why would Tortorella be asked a question about Carter Hart's health if Chuck Fletcher steps forward and says, listen, he's not going on the road trip and we're going to take care of this? Or, look, it's a day-to-day thing. He's able, give more of an explanation, because basically here's the thing. You took a guy with a concussion, put him on an airplane for 6 hours to fly to the West Coast to not play a game.
Right.
Because he was never out of the protocol until the last day that you were there to play a game. And by that point, you just said, you know what, screw it. We're just going
to ride the kid who's playing well.
And that can be a coach's decision. I get that. But you could have avoided the coach who sometimes doesn't seem like he knows exactly what information, Tortorella kind of does things it's not to say that he does things in an unorthodox way or does things in a different way as a coach. It's just, I think he does them in a different order sometimes. It kind of even falls into, post game, we talk to him first, not the players.
Right.
He I think that he sometimes doesn't have answers to questions because maybe at the time he's addressing the media following a practice or on a day of a morning skate or whatever it may be, he's talking to the media almost first thing. And then it's like, oh yeah. And then I'm having then we'll meet with the trainers. Then we'll do then we're going to have our meetings with the players, whatever the case. You know what I mean? It almost sounds like sometimes we get Tortorella to talk before certain things happen where you have the answers. So he may sit there and go, I don't know, I haven't talked to the trainers yet, but my impression is,
I wonder if that's on purpose.
Maybe it is, but I think that's where
him that deniability.
I think it doesn't matter, because I think especially when it comes to the health of a player, that's probably more the responsibility of the president of hockey operations to tell you who's available.
That's fair.
The coach can sit there and say, I was going to start this goalie anyway, or give the last start, even though, hey, Carter's cleared, I can tell you that, but he's not going to play because I want Ersson to go. That's all well and good. You can do that as a coach. Who cares? But I think that's where you needed the operations department to step up and just address an injury to your best player all season.
This organization really puts the fun in dysfunctional, don't they?
I think they do, as long as they continue to employ the people that they have. Let's be real. I mean, it's not the first time it's happened.
It's not the first time,
and that's why it's not a surprise.
Nope.
I just don't get. That was the part that I didn't get the whole time. Was just find an easy way to do this. It shouldn't be complicated. Even Tortorella has. You can make sure that Tortorella walks into that press conference with, he's not traveling.
Right.
Done deal. End of story. We'll talk about this again. Because Tortorella can then kind of do his usual thing when it comes to the media and basically even say, I just told you he's not going on the trip. Don't ask me about him for the next week. We'll tell you more. We'll update you when we get back. Everything else from here should be about who's going on the trip.
Yep.
And he can he has the right to play that card because he just gave you an answer that should suffice. Right. Carter Hart is out for a week, missing the next 3 games, not traveling. Done deal, end of story. Do not ask any more questions about Carter Hart. But instead, you open the door to asking more questions about Carter Hart because
by playing the what-if game.
Oh no, you said I expect him to start the last 2 games of the road trip. Don't say that if you don't, want it to be a big talking point.
When he doesn't, right? All right. Speaking of big talking points, Kevin, if you had an all-star ballot, who would you give it to on the Philadelphia Flyers?
Yeah, not the guy who ultimately got it. I understand elements of why Kevin Hayes is going to the All-Star game.
Mr. Healthy Scratch himself.
Well, I'll talk about that in a second because there was a lot of speculation that this could be. There's a reasoning behind this, and look, if you're picking if you're trying to pick the best player who you should send to the All-Star game from the Philadelphia Flyers, the correct answer is Travis Konechny. No, it's Travis Konechny.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Carter Hart, here's the reason why it wouldn't be Carter Hart. They're only going to name one goaltender to the roster, and then the rest is fan vote.
Okay.
And to me,
you have a better shot in the fan vote.
No, it's not that. I don't think Hart would make it, period, because I think that there's too many teams that are more successful and more in the spotlight.
Okay.
Who fans would say that goalie is among the better, and like right. Igor Shesterkin beats out Carter Hart every single time.
Probably.
Even if Hart's got slightly better numbers than Shesterkin does, which he doesn't right now, but like beginning of the year he did. Right?
Shesterkin won the Vezina. Like, yeah, I get it. Totally.
Right. So you're taking a guy from one of the better teams in the league for star power, you know? And the Rangers aren't like lighting it up by any stretch, but they're comfortably in a playoff spot at the moment.
Right.
You take one of those guys. I look at the rest of the Metro and I go, I don't know if there's a goalie for Carolina who stayed healthy enough to do it. Certainly not anybody from. I mean, Vanacek's had a nice year for New Jersey, but I don't know if he would have brought in the name recognition yet.
Right.
The goalie who I think probably beats out Hart outside of Shesterkin probably is Ilya Sorokin, who I think has had a really good year and has the numbers to back it up.
Right.
I think that, you know what, maybe Hart's the right answer 3 weeks ago. Konechny's had such a run right now.
He's very hot right now.
And brought his numbers up to such a respectable place among others. Like, he's got better numbers this year than I think, like, than Braden Point does and then Matthew Barzal does, I think, and stuff like that. It's like, and you're like, you know what? That's all-star worthy then. Like, you're beating out guys on teams that we know are really good players. Sure. And you've got the goal totals to make it work. Like, I want to be clear about something. Like, go look at Travis Konechny is tied for 16th in goals this season.
In the entire league. Like, that's
in the entire league with, and oh, by the way, you know who else has 20 goals on the season at the same time that Konechny does?
I'm looking at the same list you are. He's in pretty good company.
Yeah, he's tied with Matthew Tkachuk and Sidney Crosby and Zach Hyman.
Who plays with Connor McDavid, by the way.
And oh, by the way, you know who he has more goals than?
Austin Matthews.
Yes.
Mika Zibanejad.
Yep.
Rope Hens.
Well, you love you some Rope Hens. Right? But Austin Matthews is probably the bigger deal there, right? Like, Travis Konechny has more goals scored this season right now than Austin Matthews does.
Better player. There it is. Mark it.
But since when? You know what I mean? Like, but I even think it even goes down to, and this has probably changed over the course of a couple nights. Like, the Flyers have not played near as many games as some of these other teams have coming out of the break. Braden Point only has 2 more goals than Travis Konechny does. Yep. So does William Nylander. So does Leon Draisaitl.
I do want to point out, by the way, that Travis Konechny has 40 points as leading the team. Connor McDavid, by example, has 76 because he's a mutant. Literally almost double.
I thought you were going to say that Travis Konechny has 40 points and he's leading the team. And oh, by the way, Connor McDavid has 43 assists.
Yeah, and 33 goals to go with it. Like,
but in fairness,
man is a mutant.
But in fairness, okay. So you just said it, right? So Konechny has 40 points, right? Who's he tied with? He's tied with Brady Tkachuk, who's had a pretty good year, right? He's 1 point behind Matthew Barzal, which, again, probably something that's changed in the last couple of years. He's 3 points behind Steven Stamkos. He's 4 points behind 4 points behind Mika Zibanejad, 5 points behind Sidney Crosby and William Nylander and Artemi Panarin. Like, you see where I'm going with this? He's in a class with names of people who go to All-Star games.
He's putting up elite production. I don't think that is a stretch at this point. I'm not saying he's an elite player. I'm not saying he's playing elite hockey at all times.
No, but there's
as of right now, his production is elite.
No, but there's one caveat to that also. And that is, okay, so I just said, Crosby's got 5 more, Zibanejad 4 more, Stamkos is 3 more, Barzal's 1 more, right? And every player I'm looking at, 41 games, 40, 38, 39, 41, here's one with 43, and then you get to Travis Konechny's name and you go, oh yeah, by the way, he missed a little bit of time, 33.
Yep, he's coming.
Like, he's got 20 goals and 40 points in 33 games, where some of these guys have 40 points or whatever in more like 40 to 41 games.
Right. And Kevin Hayes, by the way, does have 35 points. Since he is the representative here, and he was actually the one chosen, we should probably talk about him a little bit too.
No, we are. Like, I know. Like, well, let's put it this way. Up until 3 weeks ago, let's just say, yeah, because 3 weeks ago was the game he was scratched for. He was benched at the end of the New Jersey game, scratched for the Ranger game, and then came back and kind of, let's not lie about this, kind of, didn't look super interested either.
He sulked.
In the game, in the games when he came back, he looked disinterested in the first few games, and therefore, he comes back and plays against, against Columbus. Well, plays against Columbus, a game where the team scores 5 goals, wins the game. He has no points. He plays, they play against Toronto. He got an assist against Toronto, so okay, fine. No points against Carolina. No points against San Jose. No points against LA. All in a win. Now in the last 2 games. 2 assists against Anaheim. Okay, a little bit back on track. And then quite literally, after the Flyers didn't score any goals in the first period against Arizona on Thursday. And that was when the All-Stars were announced after the first period. So Kevin Hayes gets announced an All-Star and then comes out and has 3 points in the second period.
He decided he was having fun. Because they told him.
Oh, he knew before the game, I think.
Oh, did he?
It wasn't.
Okay.
Yeah, because they had already done some sort of an interview with him in pregame. I guess pregame, because not unless it was in between periods, and I didn't catch when specifically that was in between periods. But he went from a stretch where he was putting up points almost every game,
the important
right around December 7th to quite literally.
But the important question is: did Keith Yandel make an Instagram video on a golf course?
Oh, I don't know about that. Yeah, okay. But that's the question. But this is what I'm saying. You're talking about a guy who went from 2 assists total in 9 games from December 9th to December 31st, and comes into the new year and all of a sudden gives you 5 points, 4 assists, 5 points in 2 games after going 9 with 2 points total.
It's almost like he decides when he wants to care and not care.
Probably a little bit.
Something that has plagued Kevin Hayes since, as far as I can tell, the day he stepped into the NHL.
No, but don't get me wrong. 5 points in your last 2 games suddenly brings you back to, he's right back to close to point per game. Like, when he's at 37 games played or 36 games played and still at 30 points, it's like, uh-oh, all right, the production's dipping again. Kind of back to reality type of stuff. And now he's right back to 10 goals and 25 assists in 38 games. It's respectable.
Yeah, and if he stays motivated for more than 2 weeks at a time, he's a solid player.
Well, and I think there's two storylines to why he's an All-Star. Number one is exactly what he's talked about the entire time since being named an All-Star. All his brother ever told him is one day it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And as he admitted, I kind of didn't think it would. But it's happened, and I think it presents an opportunity for him to represent his entire family. He already said post game from Thursday when the announcement was made, and we got to talk to him after the game because he obviously had on top of being the All-Star, he had a really good game. Right. And he's already said he's taking Jimmy's kids with him.
Awesome.
His brother Jimmy's son Bo is going to be probably out there with him when they do the skills stuff and all that. I'm
sure he'll be involved.
Exactly. It's gonna be a fun time because they already do a lot for
absolutely
Kevin Hayes and that entire part of it, the Hayes family, because of everything that they've gone through, and it's totally understandable. But there is also an element of this that kind of comes across as a let's stick it to John Tortorella for scratching the All-Star.
I felt the same thing.
Which only gets fueled when Tortorella gets asked, not about why, hey, Kevin Hayes is an All-Star, what do you think? Because, let's be real, when, maybe don't ask about Kevin Hayes when the guy has scratched him, right. But let's ask about Travis Konechny. Did you think Konechny should have been an All-Star? And John Tortorella's answer is, I don't even pay attention to that. I don't care. I really do not care. I don't watch it.
Quite frankly, I believe him.
I know, and I'm not saying it's no, but there's your headline for the next day.
I know.
I don't care about the All-Star. I don't even watch the All-Star game.
I did also want to mention, by the way, that Kevin Hayes would have been a phenomenal All-Star in the days of the 5-on-5 play a game, the true, the traditional All-Star game format as you and I grew up with it. Kevin Hayes would have been great. I think the fact that it went to the 3-on-3 really hurts that because that's not
Well, and
really
that's why
Kevin Hayes' strong suit.
and that's why you look at, does it, look for a goalie, who cares, because it's all skill and it's going to be like that type of thing. But does it hurt for a Travis Konechny to be part of a 3-on-3 skills
No,
tournament?
that'd be a
Probably
lot of
not.
fun.
Right.
That'd be a
And
lot of fun.
especially when you look at the rest of the group that's going, and it's like, yeah, these guys are gonna like put Travis Konechny out there with Jack Hughes, and put him out there, even with like Brock Nelson made it. Put him out there with Brock Nelson. That would make some sense. Like, you can
Sure.
see that being a trio that does something or whatever. You know what I mean? It
Yes.
just feels a little weird, but we'll see where everything goes now. I don't completely know all the details of the voting thing. I know it goes to a vote now, and
I
you
think
have a few days.
there's
You have a
one
few
or
days
two.
to vote.
Yeah,
I know. I know the
slots.
details about how many more make it.
Oh, okay.
I'm saying I didn't recall seeing the timeline for like voting is open until blank. Probably a week.
Yeah, I think it was like January 16th or something like that.
Okay, because I know it's 2 players and a goalie are getting voted in. That
Okay.
I know.
Okay. And, we don't put a whole lot of stock into the All-Star game, obviously. It doesn't have any effect on the sport.
But they
it doesn't this
and
or
here's
that.
the thing. They left the door open for some easy picks.
I enjoy it. I have fun watching it, personally.
Okay, here's what I'll say about it. I'm not gonna go full John Tortorella and tell you I don't watch it. I do. Do I put a lot of stock into it? It's become
It's shinny.
Well, yes, and it's become way less of a I get excited to sit down and watch it, and more a
Oh yeah, it's on.
It becomes truthfully, it's become more of a background noise type thing. Because there's a couple things about it too. Like, the All-Star game has always traditionally fallen right around when my birthday is, and 90% of the time I'm just like it kind of won't this year because it's like the first weekend of February, right? Is what it is. So
I
it's
believe so.
It's the 3rd and the 4th.
Yeah.
And they like make a whole week out of it. Like, if I'm being totally honest, the weekend of my birthday this year, they're still playing on Saturday night. They're on the road, so it doesn't make a difference. I'll just be home, but they're still playing. So I really don't like. If nothing else, the best part for me is going to be there's probably going to be a break, like over the course of that. Like, I get a little bit of time to just chill out and not have to do put together a game story and all that type of stuff. And so we'll see. But it's become more and more over the years a background noise kind of thing. I think there's been a couple of nights. I think like the night that Konechny played in his first All-Star game.
Okay.
I went out with friends that night. Like, it was on. I saw what happened. I got updates on it, but I wasn't exactly sitting there glued to the TV. Like,
was that the year with the hideous yellow jerseys?
I don't know. Konechny was wearing like a. It was very similar to the ones when Wayne Simmons played for the Flyers,
Yes.
and also they were like silver.
I believe that was the year one of the divisions, I think it was the Pacific, had horrible bright yellow highlighter yellow.
No, you're thinking of the
jerseys.
neon orange almost. It was like a neon orange with black and
maybe
or whatever. No, because they did a couple of them like that, because that was the Pacific. The Atlantic was this awful like bright blue and lime green or something like that. It was not it was not very good. And I'm trying to think of like what else there was, but that was I remember that. Oh, it wasn't the Pacific that wore the yellow. That's what it was. It wasn't the Pacific. It might have been the Central.
Oh, okay.
And then the Pacific wore because the Pacific wore jerseys that actually almost passed for Flyers jerseys.
Okay.
Honestly.
Yeah. I know the one you're talking about.
So I think the Central was wearing the yellow, if there was, any. Although they've changed it over the years, kind of like it's, it is what it is. So.
I want to see him have fun with it. I want the return of team captains.
That was okay. I didn't love that either.
I would like to see it. Okay. There was a period in the 90s where it would alternate. And one year it was World versus North America.
Yeah, that era was cool.
And then the next year it was East versus West.
Yeah, that era was cool.
I'd like to see something similar here, where one year we have divisional games, and then the next year we have draft. I think that sounds great. That way you still get that weird thing where like Claude Giroux and Sidney Crosby are on the same team. But then the next year you get draft, and you get all sorts of weird, funky combinations. Like,
The one thing the draft has going for it is that that's your one chance, especially, the one, like the years that they did it would have been before some players that we're going to mention now.
Right.
They didn't do it for 1 year. I shouldn't say that, but they did it for a couple.
Ovi begging to go last so he could get the car is an iconic moment. Like, come on.
That is. But like, okay, this is where I'm going with this. Like, okay, Ovechkin and Crosby could still be teammates, even in the format today.
Well,
They're in the same division.
Sure.
But wouldn't you love to have a situation where you turned around and you said, hey, you know what?
Give me McDavid and Ovechkin.
Right. Instead of, well, like, you got a whole bunch of scenarios.
McDavid, Ovechkin, Makar, 3-on-3. Come on.
No, well, I was going to go a little bit differently with it. You could set it up where you can get McDavid and Matthews to be teammates.
Oh.
Like, you could do that, right?
I want format. McDavid and Eichel to be teammates.
Oh, that would be funny. You know what else? Well, they could, I guess.
They could.
If both were able to make the game, but no, the other scenario I was looking at is that you could also do something I'm sure they would love to be able to do is you could put McKinnon and Crosby on the same team and let the Cole Harbor boys play together in an all-star game.
That'd be cool. No, they would love to play together too.
Right, and but that's what the draft did give you was a guy like McDavid could go up and draft his team and say, you know what, I want Austin Matthews on my team because he's a great goal scorer and I respect.
I want to see Connor McDavid because obviously he'd be a team captain. I want to see Connor McDavid go to a podium and pick from amongst his peers.
I'm saying he'd be a team captain by virtue of being one of the best players.
The best player on planet Earth, right?
But I wonder if the better play here is to let the captains not be the best.
To leave them in the draft pool?
No, it's not just like to just leave them in the draft pool. It would be you don't have to make the captains the best players on the team, but find two really good personalities so that when the draft is like no offense to Connor McDavid is the best player in the world, but I kind of don't want to stick in the mud drafting and like being like, yeah, I'll just take Matthew.
You said 2. I picture that we leave it as 4 and still do the 3-on-3 tournament, but with 4 captains and it's playground style. Like
that's
1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 3, 2, 1. Give me the.
So you want to go Serpentine draft?
Well, you have to on that format. But then your first pick, give me a Sagan traded pick situation again, like they did that one time. Come on.
The only thing I would not worry about, but the only thing you would have to, I think you have to make sure you do is whoever's picking the teams, you need to find. Okay. He's not going to be the biggest star out there, but in a heartbeat, if you're trying to pick a specific team, I'd make Trevor Zegras a captain.
I'm picking Phil Kessel.
Well, Kessel would be funny too, and Kessel also went last in one of these fantasy drafts, which would be funny. But my point is Zegras, you can tell has a good personality.
Yeah. He'd be a lot of fun with it.
I'd rather have Zegras come out and tell me why tell me why he's picking McDavid and get excited about picking McDavid.
Right.
Over McDavid picking even an Austin Matthews or an Alex Ovechkin from the other conference and saying, I take Ovi, I take whatever. You know what I mean? I just think it's going to be
you go one captain from each division, and that's what you have you can have your fans vote on everything too if you want. Listen. You're saying one captain from each division. Yeah.
Where there are no division lines. It would still be team
so one captain from each division and then the rest of the players are just thrown in the draft pool.
Right, no, I get that. What I'm saying is that you're picking a captain that represents each team or each division.
Right.
I got you.
Yeah. Either way, I think we're going to have fun with it. Kevin Hayes is an all-star. We'll talk about it a little more probably the week leading into it. But
sure.
Quite frankly, I'm going to forget about it until that starts. So speaking of something I'm going to forget about shortly now that it's over, let's talk about World Juniors for a little bit.
Sure.
Did you watch a whole lot of World Juniors this year? I did not get a chance to.
Not in the early going. I wasn't watching a ton from the very beginning. And there was, and in fairness, there was a couple days where for the most part, my interest in viewing was whenever U.S. and Canada would have been on.
Okay.
I know that there was a day. I want to say the Friday before, or the Friday of the group play.
Okay.
Neither team played. It was 2 games. I think it was like kind of lower end competition. So I definitely didn't watch anything that day. On New Year's Eve, I think the U.S. game was at the same time the Flyers played the Kings. So I was kind of distracted.
You
I wasn't
had
able
to go to work for that one.
Right. So I kind of wasn't able to. And then when Canada played later that night, I think we were already I was out of hockey mode. I was hosting something for New Year's Eve. The game,
Nice.
Flyers game went from 4 to 6:30 ish, 7 o'clock ish. I dismissed everything else at that point.
Fair.
There was another day in the earlier part of that week too that was a complete off day for both of those teams. And then New Year's Day, nobody played. Quarters were the second. That was probably about when I really started to try to watch as much as I could. But again, quarters were on the second, and I was kind of bouncing back and forth between like the Flyers are going to be on later. I had watched the Winter Classic earlier in the day.
I watched as much of the Winter Classic as I could. It was a lot of fun.
So, I totally remember. I sat down. I watched both semis. I didn't watch as much of the medal games only because the bronze medal game was at 2:30 on a Thursday afternoon and actually probably had started to wrap about the time that I was getting ready to leave to go to the Flyers against Coyotes, so I wasn't paying complete attention to the U.S. game. Now, I will say this. The entire gold medal game happened over the course of while the Flyers were playing.
Yes.
On Thursday.
Yes.
At some point in time, somebody had the TVs in the press box, some of them, flipped over to the junior game. So we weren't watching replays above us of what was on in front of us. We actually had on the gold medal game.
That's
hilarious. I distinctly saw that it was 2-0 Canada, eventually 2-2. And I did not see the golden goal because the golden goal happened as we were standing in waiting for John Tortorella.
Yeah. And okay.
I caught stuff in highlights, but I really was not watching a bunch live.
Right. And I was kind of in a similar boat. I saw a decent chunk of the Canada US game, a little bit of the gold medal game. Other than that, I was mostly kind of just following. And one thing you couldn't help but follow was Connor Bedard, because he was absolutely the story of the tournament. We're talking record smashing. Like, he did everything shy of break Peter Forsberg's points record. Like, every other record fell. All the Canadian records fell. 23 points. 9 goals, 14 assists. In 7 games.
Yeah, I mean, if the game that they played, if the gold medal game was more high scoring, he might have, or not even more high scoring, because he didn't really have much involvement.
He would have had a hard time catching Forsberg. Forsberg's at 31. He was at 23. He would have had a hard time catching Forsberg.
No. But he was going to exceed. I think 24 was a big marker because it was going to be like. It was going to put him into like it's a unique class to be in regardless. Like,
okay.
But like. He didn't really like the gold medal game wasn't completely his show, you know?
Right.
Like, not as compared to some of the other games were. Like,
by the way,
he had a 7-point game one night or something, like something ridiculous like that.
Oh, by the way, he's only 17. Like, we expect him to be on an NHL roster next year.
He just had the best performance of like a 17-year-old roughly since Wayne Gretzky in World Juniors. Like,
right. If he's not on an NHL roster, which we all expect him to be next year, if for some reason he's not, he is eligible to play in this tournament again. Add another year older.
He's actually still eligible to play in it, even if he is on an NHL roster.
Well, I know. We did see some guys go.
Well, I'm sure the Arizona Coyotes were, longing for Dylan Genther to play, for them when they're struggling it up against the Flyers, playing some of their worst hockey of the year.
I think the Coyotes are just fine sending him. Let him go play some high-quality hockey with some quality teammates. And in the meantime, we'll lose some games and get a good draft position. Start talking to Connor. He's going to be your teammate in a few months.
Sure. Do we want to mention what his WHL numbers are leading into this tournament?
Yeah. This is
because I've got him up in front of me already.
Yeah, I do too. 27 goals, 37 assists for 64 points in 28 games. I think those are the same numbers we had on our last show. He might have played another game or two.
They were getting ready for it. Yes, you're right.
64 points in 28 games. By the way, that's a 57 game pace of 130 in 57 games.
Hey, what other player were you talking about that has like an insane number of points this year?
Is his name also Connor?
Yes, it is. Isn't it going to be fun when the two best players in the league are named Connor?
So, okay.
Because it's coming. Be ready for it.
Well, and that's the thing. I wasn't alive and old enough to know better when Mario and Wayne played at the same time.
Sure. Well, especially in the heyday, right? Like, yeah, you're talking about like in the 80s when they're the two best players in the league.
If Connor Bedard, we know what Connor McDavid is. He has firmly proven himself. He does not need to do anything else to prove.
Right, and as good of a player as Leon Draisaitl is, it's like Leon Draisaitl even rides the coattails of McDavid a little bit because
But if Connor Bedard is anywhere near as good as Connor McDavid is, if he does the things that Connor McDavid has been doing on some level, in terms of production, man, this league's going to be a lot of fun. This league's going to be a lot of fun. And there's a real good argument to be made, by the way, that Draisaitl is Mark Messier in this comparison.
Sure. No, but it was the thing that got me more than anything is so Bedard scores that goal in overtime that gets Canada to the semis, and it's all over the place. I'm seeing it all over the place, right? And then the next night, McDavid has a moment and has another one of those, he's a total cheat code, he's straight out of a video game, right? And I even tweeted the clip of McDavid's, right? And then Bedard comes back the next night and immediately is making his imprint on the game that he's playing in, right?
Yep. So
and I'm sitting there thinking about it. I'm going, here we go already. It's one guy's topping the other. Like Bedard had a moment on Monday, McDavid Tuesday. Here's Bedard again on Wednesday, and
what we need, what we require. First week of the season, Connor McDavid versus Connor Bedard. It's got to be early in the schedule. It's got to be on prime time. It's got to be a Wednesday night rivalry game or whatever your format is for putting premium television on. You got to do it early. You have to, because they're going to be linked forever. They have the same name.
So basically what you're trying to tell me is don't be surprised if Edmonton opens their season against
Arizona.
Against a combination of Chicago, Columbus, Anaheim, Arizona, San Jose, Montreal, Philadelphia.
Yep.
Because as they figure out who is actually in, because let's be real. Whenever the lottery happens, that's when you're going to know who's getting him.
Exactly. They can make the schedule then.
So you can make the schedule based off of that in terms of opponent.
In late May or whenever it is.
Well, no, you know what the easy thing to do is. You play, but it's Bedard
goes
all
on those teams.
Well, no, it's Bedard goes on the road against whomever. Like this way, you can keep the date. Like you can plan the date around Edmonton, and then this way, the second matchup it doesn't matter,
right?
Or whatever it turns out to be, right? Like, in other words, as long as it's an Edmonton home game, you can make Arizona go play in Edmonton to start the year. If that's what the situation allows.
No, absolutely. I get what you're saying. For sure.
You probably can't do that much last minute flexibility with, hey, when's the building available in Chicago, in Columbus, in whatever, you know what I mean? To ensure we can get Edmonton in there at a time that works best for them. Like you can't exactly put Edmonton on a road trip to start the year with. You're going to go all of those places.
You might go to Arizona, right?
Right. But you can certainly make a last minute change and say, hey, by the way, whoever gets him, you're going to Edmonton in the first week.
They don't end up making the schedule till June or July. We'll know who has the pick by then. They have plenty of time. So All right. I think that just about does it for today's show.
Yeah,
Is there anything else we wanted to talk about?
Is there any other league stories? I did like the thing. So I hinted at this with the Boston thing earlier because we already got to what they're actually like. They've only lost 8 games total, only 4 in regulation so far. If they like, the easiest way to do on pace for is halfway, right? And they're not quite at halfway yet. But let's just play along for a second because you realize that by virtue of winning the game that they just did against San Jose, they're guaranteed to get to the halfway point and be on pace to tie the record for wins in a season.
Yeah.
They're already there.
Yep.
And oh, by the way, they play Anaheim on Sunday night. So
there's a dub.
So they might get to halfway and be on pace for
beating it.
64 wins, which has never been done before. And oh, by the way, they're already at 66 points.
And they're gonna add at the deadline. Like that's the thing.
66 points at halfway ties the record, I believe.
Crazy.
This is a record-setting team if they maintain pace.
This is a wagon.
And that may be, a good thing and it may be a bad thing. Like it may be a horrible thing for the team that, don't be the President's Trophy winner, don't be the team that everybody's talking about, but
imagine if they add like a John Klingberg.
That would be an interesting one. I think they're going to look. I think they're going forward.
Okay.
Like I don't look.
Brock Besser.
No, for whatever reason, I just sit there and I go. They're the type of team that finds a way to make Patrick Kane work.
Oh my god.
Yep. I'm sorry. It's just what.
Well, and here's the thing: they're already in overage next year. Patrick Kane's contract expires. Why not?
Right.
Go win a cup.
But they're the exact type of team that I can see. Like, let's bring him in. You imagine, can you imagine if your top line is? I mean, right? Jake DeBruskis went out for a little while, so which is unfortunate because he was having a good year. But can you imagine if their top line is Marchand, Bergeron, Pasternak, and then by the way, your second line is Krejci, Taylor Hall, and Patrick Kane?
Is that good?
I'm sorry. Is that good?
Is that good? That's obscene.
All of a sudden, Jake DeBrusk just became a third-line winger because...
All right, you ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Brock Besser.
Is that what you're thinking? I mean, I understand.
Taylor Hall, Krejci, Besser as your second line?
It's good.
Oh, yeah, but and it helps get you an asset that isn't 100,000 years old. Whose contract isn't expiring.
I get that, but... They've got enough guys who are probably to be honest, if there was ever a year to just say screw it and go after, Did
you think they were getting Lindholm last season?
No, I'll give you that, but
it feels like that kind of addition. That's what I'm saying.
I get you there, but
you get a piece that helps you now, but you get them in a position where you can lock them down long term.
I hear you, but I don't know if that's important, and it's not all at the same time. Like
I understand
because my point is the reason why I'm making the argument for Kane is that despite the fact that Kane's on an expiring contract,
right?
So
Oh, I know. You can get it double retained and get it down to.
Oh no! That's not what I'm. Oh no! That's not what I'm worried about. What I'm sitting here saying is that you're on a timeline right now where it's
go.
It could always be Bergeron's last year.
Yep.
There's a really good chance that what Krejci did is a one and done situation. Yes. You might as well go with the guy who I don't care if I only.
By the way, David Pasternak's contract is up.
Yeah, but I think
that matters.
It matters, but I think that if there's a player that you're gonna have the ability to bring back, that's the one.
Oh no, for sure. But what I'm saying is from a flexibility perspective, because David Pasternak's not making 6.7 on his next contract.
No, he's making.
It's not happening.
He's making double digits.
Right. So the pieces you can fit in around him, Boston's a wagon. But all right,
I'm just saying if you've got 1 year to go for it with Bergeron, Krejci, add Patrick Kane to the mix too while you're at it, throw it all in there and just go.
Yep.
Why not at this point? Just go. You've already got a Hall of Famer centering your top line.
Right.
Decent chance that you've got that the guy who's on the left side of him could be thrown into a Hall of Fame discussion.
Okay. I don't think David Krejci's that far away.
Well, why not add a guy who is a Hall of Famer?
Yep.
who also beat you in a cup final, who's got 3 of them to his name compared to the year 1.
And I still think there's always a chance Zdeno Chara signs a contract and shows up for the playoffs, but that's less likely. Also,
I can't see that.
Watching the Winter Classic, he has done an excellent job stepping seamlessly into his role as Bruins ambassador.
That's what I'm talking. Yeah,
he has.
That's why I can't see him.
But he's hanging around.
No, I think
he's in great shape.
I think he's hanging around just because that's where he's going to be most identified, and that's the way it is.
All right.
Let's not forget Tuukka Rask tried this and then decided never mind, and is probably
goalie's a little different. And
I know, but it's probably just as comfortable watching the duo, the hug it out duo of Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman.
That's fair. All right, we're gonna get you out of here.
And for some reason or another, the national networks have not remembered every single time. No, but have not remembered. Put the camera on them at the end of a win.
Right.
On national television.
If you broadcast a Hurricanes win at home, you wait for the storm surge. If you broadcast a Bruins win, you wait for the goalie hug.
It was the freaking Winter Classic, though.
Right.
Put the camera on the goalies.
All right, we're out of here. We'll be back next week. We got 4 Flyers games tonight against Toronto, Buffalo, 2 games with Washington. We'll be back next week to talk about them. Follow the Twitter at YWT Podcast. Follow Kevin at Kevin_Durso. Find us everywhere you find your podcast: Facebook, Instagram, Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, SportsTalkPhilly.com. I think we're on Pandora. We will be back in a week, and until then, go Birds. We'll see you.